On today's video, guys, we're going to be going over some of the most critical things you need to be aware of if you're thinking about buying any Volkswagen, Audi, MQB car. So we're talking about your Audi A3, S3, RS3. A lot of the stuff is also going to apply to Volkswagen GTI Golf R. Hopefully by the end of the video, you guys will have gained some knowledge so you are well prepared if you're thinking about buying one of these vehicles. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first on the list, guys, one of the most common points of failure you definitely want to make sure you are aware of with these vehicles, and that's going to be a water pump. Water pump failures are extremely common on all of these cars. I actually just did the replacement water pump on the RS3. 2018 model, failed right around 44,000 miles. Definitely something I had pretty much expected just going into it. What you'll want to do, if you're taking a look at getting one of these vehicles, you'll pop the hood. You'll see oftentimes there will be like a collection of coolant on that underbelly pan. That was the case with mine. Sometimes too, you can use like a mirror with like an extension tool. You can basically just slide that in there. You can see that like that seepage, that coolant buildup around that housing. So something to bear in mind. Definitely want to make sure that if you decide to buy one of these cars, that maybe you can get the dealership to replace it if it's already showing some signs of failure. Or if you decide to do it yourself, that may be the way to go. I have heard on some particular applications there have been some recalls for water pumps. So when in doubt, always check to see if this is something that could be potentially covered under a manufacturer's recall. Something else to keep in mind with the 2 liters especially, during a water pump failure, in order to replace, you obviously have to remove the intake manifold. That's going to be your best time to go ahead and do carbon cleaning. You guys know with direct injected vehicles, this is a common buildup. You will run into a lot of carbon issues, which can start to decline your performance. So if and when you start to run into the water pump, that's going to be the time where you want to go ahead and do carbon cleaning. So next on the list, this is going to be something that I've seen absolutely plague these cars in the past few years. And that's going to be that what you would describe as like that sunroof trim for the MQB vehicles. Man, these things are just cracking all over the place. I know sometimes just depending on how the car is driven, perhaps if you have like a very aggressive suspension setup on the car, you know, it's got more transfer of harshness, vibrations perhaps. If you do like a lot of really intense spirited driving, I've heard sometimes that can contribute to these failures. But I think at the end of the day, it's safe to say this is obviously a pretty subpar design. I'd call it a defect, no question. It's definitely a sad day when something like that fails, especially if your car is not even modified. This is definitely something to bear in mind. I would highly recommend taking a very close look at your sunroof if you're looking at any A3, S3, RS3, because it's probably going to cost you an arm and a leg. You guys already know. So I would highly recommend, before you get too excited getting behind the wheel and focusing on all the other kind of more noticeable mechanical things, you need to check the sunroof. Now, on a side note, some of you guys may or may not know the Volkswagen Golf R actually does not come equipped from factory with a sunroof, whereas most of the other models, you know, the GTI, the A3, S3, RS3, all those other cars typically are going to have a sunroof. And I always felt like, you know, if it makes sense from like a performance standpoint, just better longevity, reliability, less things to fail. If they don't use a sunroof on the Golf R, I really wish they would have done the same on the RS3. All right, so moving on to our next point here, and that's going to be the digital cluster. I've noticed that I saw some guys post recently in some of the RS3 owners groups, and I saw a dude posted his digital cluster horrifically malfunctioning. Man, that just like, my wallet hurts just laying eyes on that. I will tell you, I don't even want to know on paper what it's going to cost to fix that. When I saw that picture, I just couldn't help but to think like, man, I'm so glad, I'm so grateful that my particular RS3 does not have the digital cluster. I want to say most of the cars I have seen, usually the RS3s seem to all mostly have the digital cluster. For whatever reason, mine being a little bit more of a basic stripped down model, I still have the analog gauges the same as I had on my old A3. Definitely gives me a little bit more peace of mind. I feel like just a sigh of relief, one less thing to break. But I'm starting to see this. It's starting to pop up in like some different Facebook groups for the 8V cars. So if you have a digital cluster, man, keep an eye on it. I definitely hope that you don't have a catastrophic failure because, dude, I've never quoted one to replace, but man, I don't even want to see that on paper. Like I'm sure it's going to be probably an arm and a leg to fix it, and you're going to have a bad day. The next thing I want to cover is going to be the Haldex pump. If you guys want a little bit more information to get an understanding of how the all-wheel drive systems work on the MQB platform, there are several videos online. I can link down below if you're interested, but essentially what happens with the Haldex cars, there is a pump that controls fluid to activate and deactivate the power going to the rear wheels on these cars. And what happens sometimes, especially on a lot of the earlier MQB cars, especially some of the 2015 and 16s, I've seen it a lot of times on S3s as well as the Golf Rs, and you will have Haldex pump failure. You'll go to put your foot down and you find that like you feel like you're just burning up your front tires because it's not actually sending power to the rear wheels correctly. This is oftentimes a sign of Haldex pump failure. So take some time, read up a little bit more on it just so you have a good idea of how everything works. But Haldex pumps, not a catastrophic, expensive repair, but it's definitely something that I do see a lot of times is a problem on these cars. So definitely want to make sure that you're prepared for that just in case you have to replace the pump. The next thing I want to cover is going to require a little bit more investigation. What I would do is once you locate a particular vehicle that you're looking at, you want to go ahead and get the VIN number, connect with maybe someone who's a friend. You have a buddy at like a dealership or like an independent shop where they have a login for what's called Access Audi. Once you get into Access Audi, what you can do is using the VIN number, you can take a look at some of the service history on the car. And what you want to be looking for is to see if the car is flagged TD1. Basically what this will indicate is if the car has been flashed before. So that way you have an idea if the car has been tuned. Sometimes you might be looking at a car, it's used, could be modified, maybe not modified. And if you've never driven one, you're not going to necessarily be able to tell just based on the feeling in terms of performance. So I would say definitely check in there, grab the VIN, plug it into Access Audi if you have a connection there. Then you want to be looking to see if the car is flagged TD1. Of course, if you're going to be having any concerns, if the car is being sold to you with any like remaining factory powertrain warranty, once your car is flagged TD1, you got to be aware that obviously they're not going to stand behind the warranty because the car has been modified with an aftermarket performance tune. So yeah, once you go TD1, man, there's really no going back. The only exception to this would be in a rare case where if you had bought the car, let's say there's still a factory powertrain warranty left on it, and you bought something like an APR Plus tune, which is the only software on the market, to my knowledge, that actually matches the factory powertrain warranty. It's a much more expensive tune, so that might be something to look at. Always be sure to read the fine print, get as much information as possible. The more information you know about the previous history of the car, the better. So speaking from the standpoint of a car enthusiast, former advisor, grab the VIN, Access Audi. Always be on the lookout just in case there's TD1. That basically wraps up a simple overview for today's video, guys. Volkswagen and Audi MQB. I know there's many different things that can fail on so many different versions of these cars. Always follow your best practices, use good judgment at all times. Just wanted to focus on a couple specific things regarding common points of failure and concern with the MQB platform. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Always like to hear your feedback. Share your experiences if you've had any of these cars, any points of failure that you want to share with others. Always good to have some productive conversation down below. Well, as always, thank you guys so much for joining me today. Give the video a thumbs up, really helps me out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'm sure to see you guys in the next one. Have a great day.